Thursday, March 2nd, 2023, along the banks of a stream in the middle of our Oasis Hotel complex in Ubud, Bali, Indonesia. We are hanging out inside in the middle of the day, as has become kind of my habit, as I like to do animation and arts when it's the most hot, whereas Shamar tends to hang out by the pool, me being photosensitive. I prefer to stay inside, and we've done a lot lately. The two main things we've done have been we've gone to the monkey forest, and we've gone to the Puri Lakasan Museum. So, what do you want to do first? The art? Let's do the art. What do you think about the art, Shamar?
Yeah, we did visit the art museum, and I loved it. I loved it. Okay, so you see these paintings, or some of them are done with Chinese ink, and the ones that I liked were of these, I guess, images of like rice fields or people working in the fields, and they're done in black and white, and just so beautiful. It almost reminded me of that story, like Where the Wild Things Are. Like there's something about these paintings. It's kind of like magical, and like there's so many different tropical leaf shapes, and there's just something like very like a paradise sort of feeling and like magical to them. So, but the interesting thing is that I just thought this was like obviously the Balinese like style, like it just came from people of Bali. But we found out that there was a gentleman named Walter Spies in the early 1900s, and he was a German gentleman, and an artist here in Ubud for, I guess, many decades. And he had a huge influence on the dance, the painting style, and more. So these paintings that I really liked, actually, they was like almost more of a well, I don't know if it's collaboration.
Heavily influenced by him.
Yeah, it was influenced by him. So I guess he had some different techniques and just like maybe a more modern way of looking at things, and that kind of rubbed off on some of the local Balinese artists. And so the style kind of changed up a bit. But I really like the style. It's beautiful.
Probably mention where this guy Spies comes from. He was the son of a German diplomat in Moscow, Russia, where he was born. And he was just a prodigy with all things arts, like painting, theater, music, composition, all of it. He was just a total prodigy from an early age. And he made his way to Bali later in life, after World War One, and he pretty much memorized as much as you can learn about the entire island of Bali, like the customs, the language, all of the animals and plants, the rhythms of the country, like everything about the religion, their art, the history, all of it. He was just a walking encyclopedia. And he got chummy with the king of Ubud. And this is during the Dutch colonial period. For people who don't know, Indonesia was a Dutch colony, and there were still kings that were basically stripped of power, but they had a little bit of influence where they still reigned under ultimately Dutch control. But he got chummy with the royal court here in Ubud, and he formed an artist cooperative with the help of the king and another Dutch painter named Rudolf Bonnet and other Balinese people. And he brought all of his mastery of art and theater to Bali. So a lot of the dances that you see here today were heavily influenced by his choreography. And the paintings, he introduced things like perspective. And before he came along, painting wasn't considered that as prestigious as like stoneworking or woodworking, architecture, all that. But Walter Spies, he changed it. Well, he didn't change it. He influenced a new generation of artists who shifted away from what was primarily paintings about Hindu gods and religious imagery and changed it to more everyday scenes, like people working in the fields, nature, landscapes, that kind of thing. So you can see a lot of that in the museum that we went to. Lots of, like, some of the first generation Balinese paintings influenced by him of landscapes that really hadn't been done before. So all these beautiful representations of Bali in the 1930s, with the rice terraces, waterfalls, fishermen, all of that. It's all really fascinating.
Oh, it is. And I'll say it again. I just love the leaves in these paintings because there's like the, I don't know what you call them, like the elephant ears and like these beautiful tropical flower shapes. And there's so many different leaf shapes. And they're able to capture this so beautifully in these paintings. And it's almost like they're alive, like pulsing with energy from nature. You can almost feel it coming off of the canvas or off of the paper. So I was just walking through this museum, just mesmerized by each painting that I saw. And I like the older paintings too. It's just that those are more of, I guess, like gods and old mythologies, which are cool, but I guess I was just drawn more to the images of nature and the leaves and the trees and the flowers.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And there was one guy whose work was up. His name was, I know I'm going to butcher this. Is it Augustinomen Lampad? And back when he was born in the 19th century, a lot of Balinese people didn't really keep track of the exact year that they were born in. So he was born roughly around 1862, and he lived to be, let's see, over 100. So I think 116, of course, which seems kind of implausible to me. But honestly, I know that the surrealists they all lived to be a pretty old age, but this dude hanging out in Bali, doing his art just constantly from a young age, I could see how you could live a long time in a flow state like that,
Yeah,
surrounded by
totally.
beauty and nature.
Or maybe they just didn't really know his birthday or his birth date.
Yeah,
Just made it up. I have no idea.
That seems more plausible, but he was producing stuff when he was young, so I guess that was, you can kind of keep track of how old some of his work is. So he wasn't only a painter. He did other stuff too, like stonework, architecture, that type of thing. So, that was stunning, that museum. There were also some good wood carvings there, which I just loved. I think I liked that a little bit more than a lot of the paintings.
Oh,
Yeah.
I like the paintings more.
Well, there are more paintings in general, but the wood carving is just so smooth and symmetrical,
Yeah.
and a lot of them are really complicated with really skinny limbs, which look like they'd be easy to break during carving. So I was just
what an art
fascinated by
form.
that. Yeah.
Like I can imagine making something out of clay and forming it with your hands, but to imagine making something out of wood where it's like you got to get in there and chop it up and carve it and make it and turn it into something beautiful. That just seems so hard. Like how do they even do that? I don't even know.
I've heard that in Balinese, traditionally, there's no word for artist. Like
Yeah.
that's not like something that a special person does. It's just kind of, it's more like what kind of art you do, rather than like, do you do art?
It's just assumed everybody is creative or
Craftsman of some sort.
yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, that was a wonderful museum. To round out the story of Walter Spies, he was arrested in a Dutch colonial crackdown on homosexuality. So he was charged with gay pedophilia in the 1930s. Arrested, spent time in prison. The father of the underage boy that he was alleged to have fornicated with was he defended Walter Spies. He said, "It's a great honor for my son to be in a romantic relationship with Walter Spies." So he didn't want there to be any charges pressed. But Walter Spies charged with underage sodomy. So in the clink he went, and which I'm told scandalized the Balinese people because they thought that the guy was such a big shot, and they really had respect for him, even knowing what his sexual habits were. But I also heard that Bali was becoming something of an international a hotspot for a very bohemian hotspot. People like Charlie Chaplin would visit, and they were kind of fascinated that the local women here didn't wear tops when they were casually walking around. And I read somewhere else that kind of over time in the 30s became known as a place for child sex trafficking. So it became somewhat notorious, but anyway, that became moot as World War II approached and tourism dried up, and the Dutch detained Walter Spies, and because he was of German origin, they detained him, threw him in the clink again, and put him on a boat to what is now Sri Lanka to get him away from where he could potentially be sabotaging things. But his boat was hit by the Japanese, a bomb of some sort, or maybe a torpedo, and he died at sea. And that was the end of this legendary guy. But his influence is everywhere. You can't go to any museum without hearing a reference to this guy, at least in Ubud. So, magnificent art that we got to see at this place. And we met an artist who was just hanging out front with a whole bunch of samples of his work, and he was painting and so cheerful to talk to us.
Yeah, and I was watching him create this painting with such close attention to detail, and he had these tiny little brushes, and he was in there making these little lines and etchings with different colors. I was reading too that I guess maybe back in the day, maybe not so much now, but they used to use in one style of painting, it was maybe like 5 colors or so. And they said like the black came from soot, and then the white, it came from mashed up pig bones, which was interesting to me. So, but I don't think that's what Walter Spies was doing. Maybe this was before, but I thought it was interesting.
I think it was. Yeah, they had a more limited palette before he came along. But yeah, and a lot of the imagery came from Hindu stuff, as we said before, and again, Bali majority Hindu, Indonesia as a whole overwhelmingly Muslim, and Bali became kind of a refuge for the surviving members, according to legend. According to legends, it became kind of a refuge for the court of the Hindu empire that was collapsing under the onslaught of Muslim conquest. So the old Hindu Buddhist empire, Majapahit, was a big maritime empire all across what's now Indonesia. And they had their golden age here. And so during their golden age, they built the monkey forest that we went to in 1350. And they were big-time trading power. I mean, their empire was a bunch of islands all over the place. So they were formidable as a navy. In fact, the Mongols, when they took over China, they tried to attack and lost. And later, when the Mongols were overthrown in China by the Ming, the native Chinese people, the Ming decided, you know what, we need to show that China's back. We're not under the Mongol yoke anymore. We're back, and we're going to start trading with the rest of the world. And we're going to go all the way to Africa, all over the known world, and spread Chinese influence and get rich in the process. But they had trouble with the Majapahit Empire. They still were They were like, we're the only people who can control the sea lanes around here. So go away, China. So what China did during the Ming expansion period, they promoted various factions to remake the world more in their favor. So in Southeast Asia, they propped up the Thai people against the Khmer Empire, which is now Cambodia, and got favorable terms from the Thais that they supported. And in what is now Indonesia, they propped up the Sultan of Malacca, the Sultanate of Malacca, which was Muslim and was in both Sumatra and the Malay Peninsula, so what is now Malaysia. And this little choke point through which the Chinese could pass, the Chinese really curried favor with the Sultanate and tried to really build them up as a counterweight to the Majapahit Empire. And eventually the Sultanate got powerful enough that they started to displace the Hindu-Buddhist Majapahit Empire. And eventually the different Muslim kingdoms, they basically they gobbled up the Majapahit Empire as it declined and declined and declined. And the refugees from court, according to lore, all fled to Bali. And Bali was easier to defend than other islands. So it became this last outpost of this collapsed empire. And when the last of the islands were taken over by Muslims and various sultanates, Bali basically turned into about I think it was either 7 or 9 kingdoms. Sorry, folks, I confused the numbers. But these little kingdoms that were all Hindu-Buddhists, they mixed with the local nature reverence, nature worship beliefs. And what you get is a syncretic religious artistic legacy, which still exists in Bali today. Mm-hmm. So we went to the monkey forest, which was made during the Majapahit Empire's golden years, around 1350. Mm-hmm. And what did you think about the monkey sanctuary?
I just thought it was so beautiful. I mean, okay, yes, it's touristy. It's full of tourists, but the place looks like I don't know, like a Fern Gully or something out of a movie. And I hate to say it looks like a movie because it's actually real, but it's just so insane with these vines everywhere and like jungle plants everywhere. And then everywhere you look, there's little monkeys and they're hanging out, like scratching each other and grooming each other and like holding the little babies. And what was fascinating to me is that these tourists could come up with their cameras and get like right in the monkey's face, and the monkey didn't even seem to mind. Very strange. Mm-hmm. I guess they're really tame. I was a little bit scared. I kept thinking that a monkey was going to jump on me and then I would just freak out. But so I was a little scared getting close to the monkeys.
Yeah, the staff feeds them sweet potatoes. And there's these, like, I think they're wrought iron cages that are stocked with sweet potatoes that the staff kind of open up every now and then to feed the monkeys. These are long-tailed macaques. So interesting matrilineal species of monkey. And tourists are told don't give them food and
don't look them in the eye.
Don't look them in the eye. Don't walk around with food in your purse, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I did see one of the women in front of us, when she wasn't paying attention, a monkey jumped on her purse and it pulled something out. And then her boyfriend turned her and was like, look. Yeah. And the monkey got away with something from her purse.
I think it was just napkins or something.
It probably had like this food smell on it or something.
I'm told that the long-tailed macaques, also known as crab-eating macaques, because on the beach they will eat crabs. They kind of eat everything. They don't like it when they think you're hiding food from them either. Sometimes they think like, this person's got a stash somewhere, even if they can't smell it. Like if they think with their little monkey brains that you got some snackage in like a package.
Watch out.
Like they'll grab it. And water too. So yeah, but all over the place, there's temples in the forest with monkeys climbing around these ancient shrines, and there's a place where you can wash in the holy spring where the monkeys drink water and such.
I was honestly more impressed by just the luscious nature, and then the monkeys were the icing on the cake for me. Because I mean, coming from Korea again to just total jungle lusciousness is still blowing my mind. So I was just in awe. I felt like I was in a huge greenhouse, but it wasn't a greenhouse; it was real, and that's what was blowing my mind.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and I thought it was pretty cool. And let's see, I'm trying to find the actual word that they use to describe the three-part religious tradition. I don't, let's see, I probably can't find the word in time for this recording, but there's a term that they use for the three parts, the three elements of their worldview, which involves the spiritual realm, the human realm, and the natural world. And those are all intertwined. So the monkey forest is supposedly part of that. There's rituals that are done, and it's supposed to look after nature. And if we keep nature in good shape, then the humans will be in good shape because they won't have floods and droughts and such because they've preserved the natural world. So that's interesting, I think.
yeah, and when we were there just happened to be a dance performance going on. So this was actually the first dance performance we've seen, and we didn't plan it, we just happened upon it. And it was amazing. They had this creature, I guess it was like a lion.
Barong,
Oh, okay.
Barong, and it's supposedly, some people think it's influenced by China
Okay.
from like centuries and centuries and centuries ago. But it looks a lot like the way lions are.
Kind of like a lion or some creature kind of like
two
that.
people in a giant costume with a big freaky head.
Yeah, and then they have all these musicians off to the side playing with an instrument, which maybe was the gamelan. I'm not sure how you say it. I'm not sure. There's a few different Balinese instruments.
Was
But
gamelan just a word for their instruments in general?
oh, maybe. I don't know. I'm not sure. But they were playing these amazing instruments, and then this creature was dancing and moving, and this monkey creature came out, and then before you knew it, you had this procession of women in these white like sarongs and fabric, and they were doing these beautiful movements, and
And
there's a
shrieking too.
oh yeah, they were shrieking, and there was this whole story that was just kind of evolving before our eyes, and I was just standing there, just complete awe. I just thought it was just so beautiful, and the fact that they're doing these performances every day, probably even multiple, maybe twice a day, is just insane. I mean, there's that many tourists coming to Bali to see this, and these dances are happening in different palaces around town every day. It's just mind blowing to me.
I thought it was awesome.
It was awesome.
Yeah. I heard that the monkeys there's a lot of them now. There's several hundred. And back in the day, there weren't as many, like nearly as many. So now they've got a lot of monkeys, but they don't really know what to do. I mean, one thing they can do is sterilize a bunch of them so they don't reproduce as much, and maybe their population can diminish somewhat. But that costs money, and I don't know if they quite have the dough for that. And another thing they could do would be to expand the sanctuary so there's more space for the monkeys. Mm-hmm. But I know that during the pandemic, when tourism was shut down in Bali, the monkeys started raiding
Really?
surrounding homes and gardens and stuff. So some people said, oh, they're just bored because they're used to being around humans and they want to go get into some monkey mischief. And other people said, no, they're hungry. They're not being fed quite enough.
Right.
So probably both.
Well, it was funny because when we left just outside of the monkey forest, there was this monkey chilling out in the back of a scooter. He was just hanging out there.
Yeah.
He looked totally at home.
Sitting on the seat of the motorcycle, posing for pictures.
Yeah, it was awesome.
I guess they used to give tourists bananas to give to the monkeys in the early 1990s. But they said that it made the monkeys, for whatever reason, too fat and aggressive.
Oh, give me more.
Give me more. It's awesome. So you'd think it'd make them bloated and slow, but maybe it's like crack to them.
I don't know.
something.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It's like they can't get enough.
Can't get enough.
Give me some more of that sweetness.
Yeah. So We saw the monkey forest and we saw the Pure Lukusan Museum.
Yeah.
Yeah, have you noticed anything else about the nature? Like the
Well, oh yeah.
rain?
So we're here at the tail end of the rainy season, and it definitely is rainy, but it comes in spurts. So sometimes in the morning we'll get like a torrential downpour, and then it'll just totally clear up and it'll be sunshiny and beautiful. And then we might get another torrential downpour in the afternoon or later that night. So I'd say it's definitely raining at least once a day, if not twice a day, but it's only for a short amount of time. And I actually really like it. I mean, we're not in the point, we're kind of just doing the slow travel method. So we're not out trying to see everything every day, which I think makes it much more, I mean, actually more enjoyable because we can kind of just hang out on the front porch and actually enjoy the rain coming down.
And
Whereas if we were trying to like
yeah.
see everything, it would definitely make travel way more
I mean,
difficult.
we've really lucked out with our hotel. I mean, it straddles a river or a stream rather, and it's just plants, 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 and geckos and lizards.
It is an
and frogs,
oasis. Yeah,
birds,
it's a
and
retreat
fruit.
center and a guest house. So it's like, yeah, it's basically this little Eden oasis with it has a yoga space, a meditation space, all these different guest houses, beautiful pool in the center. And it's just absolutely lovely. So we don't even leave that much right now. We're just kind of regenerating, rejuvenating here, and then just enjoying this beautiful space.
Making my own art.
Yeah, we're making our own art and doing some research on Bali.
So it's rainy season, and I keep thinking about water. I read one place said that the Hinduism found in India there's more emphasis on fire as a ceremonial thing and a element of veneration, whereas in Bali it's more about water, and I can understand why. So they have a system of irrigation traditionally called the Subak irrigation system. And this is for their rice paddies that they have all over the place. These wonderful terraced, beautiful fields that go back to the 800s, the 9th century. So these are managed by priests, and the priests would determine how to distribute water through an incredibly complex network of irrigation. So there's these water temples all over the place, and the priests who run these temples, they are in charge of their cooperative water management throughout the island, and they would know exactly how to time this in tune with the seasons and all that. And I think it won a UNESCO World Heritage Award not that long ago. I think like in 2014. And of course, that just fueled more tourism, which is not necessarily a good thing. But the water management system has been in operation for over 1,000 years. And when the Green Revolution swept the world in the 60s and 70s, which is the mass introduction of fertilizers, pesticides, hybrid strains of crops like rice, the Indonesian government here in the early 70s started saying, we're going to decree that you adopt the Green Revolution approach to agriculture, and you got to start applying pesticide and all this nasty stuff. And they stripped the power of the water priests and said, we need to start doing a more capital-intensive method of crop management. And of course, Bali has volcanoes, and the soil is incredibly fertile from the volcanic ash. And the rice didn't really need any pest or any fertilizer. So all the excess fertilizer that wasn't gobbled up by the rice all got flushed down the rivers and streams down to the ocean, and it helped erode the coral reefs. So it damaged the soil and kind of messed up the ecosystem and fucked up the coral reefs. And of course, if you mess up the coral reefs, you're going to mess up the fish. And it led to problems with the fishermen too. So That's the Subak system. But over time, they started reversing those decisions. And it wasn't really that long ago. I think starting about 25 years ago, after the fall of the Suharto dictatorship, they started easing up and allowing the water priests to have more authority. But now the big problem is tourism gobbling up and fragmenting the rice paddies so that they're not part of the big integrated irrigation system like they used to be. Now a lot of places are isolated and they're not part of the planned cooperative management of the water that can be overseen by a priest, which has a more holistic understanding of water distribution than the individual operators of farms. So interesting with the Suba. Another thing I learned thinking about the ecology and the monkeys and stuff was, what are their biggest animals, their apex predators? And I found out that they used to have leopards here, but those got extirpated, eliminated from the island, and they used to have a native type of cattle, which isn't found here anymore. And more recently, the Balinese tiger, which is like other tigers, except that its fur is incredibly bright. It's brighter than other tigers, and its head is a little smaller. So these were wiped out mostly, I think, by the 1950s. That's when the last remaining Balinese tigers were eliminated in the wild. Now they're extinct, but there are bones and furs in various museums. So maybe you could resurrect them Jurassic Park style in the future, but we're not quite there yet. But the biggest culprits with that were the Dutch. They would trap them in big steel jaw traps, mess up their feet, and bait them with goats or whatever. And tigers would get their paw crushed by one of these traps, and then the sport hunters would just shoot them at close range once they were trapped. And it's pretty disgusting. So many people killing many, many, many tigers over a short amount of time. And they tried in, I believe, the 30s, I believe, to establish a park for the tigers in the northwest tip of Bali, but by then it was too late. So I believe they abolished the park after independence. But yeah, interesting place where the tigers used to roam.
Where the tigers used to roam.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now they've got giant snakes and giant reptiles.
There's cobras.
There's cobras. We hear stories about cobras coming up the pipes and
In the toilet.
coming out of the
It's a
toilet.
cobra, but it's a snake. So now I told Keith, I was like, hey, make sure you put down the toilet lid because we don't want a snake coming in here by sneaking in.
I always keep the toilet seat down, but the toilet lid. Yeah, I've been now every time I open the toilet lid at night. When she told me that, I had heard about it a long time ago, but then I forgot, and now I'm like afraid to lift.
Snake's gonna jump out.
Snake is gonna jump out and get my hand every time I lift the lid.
I think we're fine. We're not like, we're kind of in a place. Well, I mean, who knows? Who knows? There's like jungle all around, but maybe that's more like out in the countryside near the rice fields or something.
Yeah. There's one other thing I found out about the nature, or that I'd like to emphasize rather, is the mangroves. These wonderful trees like you have in Florida, and there's lots of different species. They can exist in saltwater, and they create wonderful buffer against heavy waves and storms, typhoons, and all that. Bali's in the middle of the Coral Triangle, which is kind of like the equivalent of the Amazon rainforest, but for the ocean. It's like the biggest concentration of coral, reef-building corals in the world. It goes up to the Philippines to the north, and west it goes to Sumatra, the western part of Indonesia, and east it goes to the Solomon Islands, which are just east of Papua New Guinea. And we're kind of in the middle of the base of that triangle. So the corals, which have been damaged, are really important for the habitat for fish and lots of migrating sea turtles, including the hawksbill turtle, which I just love because he reaches down and eats the sponges off of reefs and keeps them healthy. So if you have healthy sea turtle population, it can make your coral reefs healthier, and then the coral reefs can sustain small fish, which are eaten by the big fish, and blah 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 blah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, very nice. So that's the outer rim protecting the islands. Is coral, which also creates a buffer against storms and such. And then there's an inner buffer of mangroves, which protects the mainland. It's like a second line of defense against extreme weather. And one of the places that is being threatened is Benoa Bay, which is right next to the airport where we came in. Our first hotel is right next to Benoa Bay, and that's been the absolute center of civil resistance in Bali since the late 1990s. And they've been trying to reclaim that, do the Dubai thing where you make artificial islands and pretend that that's environmentally responsible when it absolutely is not. So they've been ruining the mangroves and trying to turn it into a kind of a business development zone. So there's been lots of fighting, lots of organizing around that. I believe I mentioned in the last episode that the Balinese punk scene has been raging against that and trying to get the youth involved in stopping that. So, yeah, a lot of action here regarding the environment, and going to the monkey forest makes me reflect on the ecology and our role in it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, we've talked about a little bit about the art and a little bit about nature. What about the food?
The food?
Yeah. We've tried a few new dishes, Indonesian food.
Well, there's the warung, which is like a traditional roadside mini restaurant. The warung that you like, that we go to every night, kind of across town, beautiful. And now they have good moringa curry.
Yeah, really good moringa curry.
And we've tried all their traditional soups. And
Everything, of course, comes with rice. But there are some really good flavors, though I think we get a little bit tired of the rice, but
yeah,
just kind of how it goes.
if you get the nasi goreng, which is Indonesian for fried rice, the rice is more bearable because it's got flavor. But
It's fried with some spice or something.
I did not grow up in a culture where we just eat a pile of rice, and it's just, I don't know, sometimes I can do that if I can mix it with some soup, but it all just seems kind of like filler to me. I'm not a big rice guy.
Yeah. But these warungs are amazing because, I mean, they're so cheap. Like so last night for dinner, probably for $11 for both of us, which is amazing. We're in this beautiful, dark outside area with these beautiful candles glowing in the night. And they bring out to us these huge coconuts. We each are drinking out of a huge coconut. And then we get this moringa curry. And then I think we got this really delicious chicken soup and I don't even know, it's like a fried tofu or something.
It's tempeh.
Tempeh, but it had this delicious sauce. And so, I mean, the table is just completely filled with food. And it was just a beautiful atmosphere to be in, very relaxing. I think we've been there 3 times now. 2 of the times we had a downpour of rain, and then the servers come out under these umbrellas to serve the food. But I mean, you couldn't ask for a more relaxing evening. And the fact that it's just so inexpensive is crazy.
With a banana tree with a sign on it that says, "Free bananas for our customers. Please take one."
So we took a banana last night, and I just had it today. I made a little peanut butter banana sandwich for my snack. The banana actually tasted a little bit like a plantain. It had a little bit different of a flavor.
Was it sweeter?
It was sweeter. It's like these are like mini bananas. So
When I've ordered bananas on the menu, it's always under the dessert section of the menu.
Yeah.
First time I ordered fried bananas, I didn't know that it was dessert, but it's clear that they presented it as a dessert with like a little drizzle of syrup.
yeah, and sometimes for breakfast they'll bring out these little Indonesian treats where it's basically like some rice, and in the center there'll be like the sugar mixed with coconut shreds. And these are really delicious. Or sometimes like a little bit like of a syrupy honey kind of thing drizzled over it. Really yummy, yum, yum.
Yeah.
So yeah, Indonesian food, it's good. I mean, I still would say Korean food is going to be my top cuisine. I think
think
one thing is
prepare for disappointment if you're going to compare the world's cuisines to Korea, because Korea is in a league of its
it's in a
own.
league of its own.
Yeah.
And I think here the issue that we have is like there's so much rice, and I don't think we like eating that much rice. And
I always
secondly,
eat more rice than I want to because I want to be polite and like
yeah.
not waste food.
And then also because of that, the portions are actually not that big because it's mostly rice. And then it's like the dish itself is almost like the side. So whereas I'd prefer it to be the other way around, where the rice is the side, a little bit of rice and more of the main dish. But that's just not how it is. So there's been some times we've ordered like 2 meals for one person because we're still hungry.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I want to try their seafood, but we're in the interior of the island. We're in Ubud, and when we get out after we've recharged a little to the seaside villages, I would like to try some traditional Balinese seafood. That sounds pretty good.
yeah, let's do that.
I heard that traditionally they would harvest eels, which would live in the rice paddies.
Oh, I love eel.
And I love eel. Oh man, that stuff is so
I
good.
remember reading about that. Yeah, they put them in the rice paddies. Yeah.
They were trying to. I know there were some people that were trying to shift to the traditional eel harvesting during the pandemic because they needed something to do when the tourist industry was shut down. So I wish them the best of luck with that. All right, got anything else?
I mean, I guess that's it. I mean, the only other thing would be a very small update on our transition from Korea to here. It's been what, a week and a half now? Almost 2 weeks?
Yeah.
And it just feels like I feel like I literally put a jetpack or like a rocket on my feet and just completely blasted off into a whole nother realm of reality. The difference between this and Korea is so extreme, and I'm pinching myself. I feel like I'm in a little bit of a dream or like a little slice of heaven, especially right now when everything's new. It's kind of like that honeymoon period. So my eyes are soaking it all in, and I'm just like, how the heck did our life transition from English teachers, in the middle of winter, brown Korea and concrete buildings, absolute Eden oasis, total
Artistry
artistry.
permeating everything and everyone.
Oh my God. And like my body has completely downshifted in a week and a half. I know the first few days, I noticed how I was so stressed and I had to like slowly let those layers fall off. But now a week and a half in, I'm already feeling much more in tune with nature. I'm just much more relaxed. And it feels so amazing, I gotta say. It's probably gonna take the rest of the month to really let all that stress from years of teaching go. But
We still haven't made it to the beach, and that'll be the dessert.
yeah.
After we map out as much as we can of the interior of the island, I'd love to go snorkeling and maybe start to learn to surf. I was thinking of saving that for a later trip, but who knows? But there's dolphins and hammerhead sharks and whales and sea turtles and all that. So an oasis at sea and on land.
That's right. So yeah, we plan to be here maybe till after the Nyepi Day, the Day of Silence. So that's I think about 3 more weeks. Might even be a month. I'm not sure. We'll be hanging out here for a bit, and then afterwards maybe head to one of the smaller islands. I'm looking at this place called Gili Air, and it's a place where they don't have cars. There's just bicycles and I think some horses, and I thought that would be
Extra
lovely.
paradise.
Yeah, extra paradise. So we'll see, but we'll let you know what unfolds.
Keep you in the loop. All right. I think that's good. This is Thursday, March 2nd, 2023, in Ubud, Bali, Indonesia. And with that, we're signing off.
All right, until next time. Bye.
Bye.